any other day was not yesterday when the Indianapolis Colts decided to go ahead and turn this dial all the way up to 11. For anyone that missed it, the Indianapolis Colts have been bad this season. Very, very bad relative to expectation. They have already benched their starting quarterback in Matt Ryan in favor of Sam Ehlinger. And now, as of yesterday, they announced the firing of their head coach, Frank Reich. And we had talked on this podcast about the possibility of this based on the way the Colts season had gone. Wasn't going to be surprised when it happened. The surprise came when the Colts then announced that they were hiring ESPN NFL analyst and former six-time Pro Bowl center Jeff Saturday as the interim head coach. Now, Jeff Saturday, in addition to his job at ESPN, had been a consultant for the team, is also in the Colts Ring of Honor. Everyone was floating around that video of him and Peyton Manning arguing on the sideline that people love. He had been the head coach at a high school in Georgia for 3 seasons. But Brandon, needless to say, this melted everybody's fucking brains when this news dropped.
Yeah, rightfully so, Mike. It makes no sense. I want to say it makes no sense because I'm sure Jim Irsay has his rhyme or reason, but I do think that he is reading about what all the analysts are saying about it to make it make sense. Maybe he's looking up what Mina Kimes is saying about it to try to say, to really give some backbone to this wild decision, Mike. When I first heard about it, all I thought about was, remember Whose Line It Is? No.
Whose Line Is It Anyway?
Who Wants to Be a Millionaire?
Oh, yes.
Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Yes. Where you could either poll the audience, do a 50-50, or phone a friend to help get the answer right. And Jim Irsay is phoning a friend right now. He's phoning his boy Jeff. He's like, come on in here. Let's get this shit figured out. But I don't know what he is going to get figured out, Mike, because I imagine coaching in the NFL, even at the interim level, is a little bit more difficult than coaching at the high school level.
Yeah, I know Adam Schefter felt like he needed to throw that into the report. I think that ended up doing more harm than good as far as people using that as the punchline for jokes. Brandon, this was a tough one, and a bunch of people have pointed this out. Jeff Saturday was someone that I got to work with. Jeff Saturday was someone that I looked up to as a young offensive lineman and the job that he did with the Colts, and was an awesome teammate at ESPN. And so when I first saw the news, my first thought was, oh, wow, very excited for Jeff. He's a person that spent 13 seasons of his life playing for this franchise, and I'd imagine loves that franchise a whole lot. And so the chance to go back and be the one running towards this and saying, I'm here to help, and getting that opportunity. Like, we say that all the time in college sports, Brandon. In college football, I would say there's no more valuable asset to your program than an ascending head coach who happens to be an alumni of your school. Like, we see it all the time. Like, it can bring you a candidate that might be able to lift you out of obscurity. Jim Harbaugh at Michigan is just one of the latest examples of a coach who's been able to bring his program back to confidence because he happened to go there. And so for Jeff, I'm sure for him, when he was asked if he wanted to do this, probably an opportunity to jump at. If this is ever something that you've entertained and this is a place you love, I can understand it. And I was excited for Jeff because I believe he is a great man. I believe he's a great leader of men. Like, all these things are assets in the way that you look for in a head coach. But I also understand that hiring practices in the NFL are an extremely delicate and complicated subject, and there were going to be a lot of people that felt some type of way about the way that this went down. Probably people in that building that feel some type of way about how this went down.
This move just doesn't make any sense when it comes to thinking about winning football games from the outsider's perspective.
And there are a lot of people that would say maybe the Colts are not interested in winning football games. Maybe at this point this is a tank job. Those are things that are getting bantered around there.
Good quarterbacks.
Yeah, good quarterbacks upcoming in the draft, all these things that you want to be in range of here. There could be an argument then for keeping Frank Reich because they were doing an awfully good job of losing with him at the helm. But again, maybe there's something to that. Maybe it's not. I don't want to assign too much because, Brandon, what we saw, and Holly Anderson, who does a great job over at the Shutdown Fullcast, has often said, they can, so they did, is usually the justification for men in positions of power who make decisions like this. They can, so they did. And this may boil down to just that, because the second part of this that got even more crazy was the press conference. So Chris Ballard, the general manager, Jim Irsay, the owner, and Jeff Saturday were at a press conference later last night talking about this decision. And Brandon, if I was someone especially a minority coaching candidate, because I understand any coaching candidate is going to feel some type of way about this. And it is worth noting that in the press conference, Jim Irsay was asked about if this was Rooney Rule compliant, and he said yes, because this is an interim coaching job. It lines up with the Rooney Rule. After the season, there will be a full process for interviewing. This is for 8 games, hopefully more. All I'm thinking about is the Raiders. There's no talk of permanence at this point. And so that Rooney Rule conversation will be had in earnest after the season. But I would understand anyone who looked at this, any coach of any color, but specifically coaches of color, because we know what a tough road that's been in this league because of how this league has operated in the past with that, in ways that have been borne out statistically and shown really irrefutably that this league has a problem with hiring coaches of color. I would have been awfully dismayed watching Jim Irsay acquit himself at that press conference, because I walked into that press conference saying, all right, I had seen people bring up Reggie Wayne, who's on that staff, as an assistant coach, coaching up the wide receivers, as someone with a similar resume saying, why wasn't he given this job? And all these different things. And part of me was just waiting like, all right, maybe there will be an explanation. And maybe there was actually a thought process to this. And then I got to that press conference, and it is really hard to listen to the things that Jim Irsay said and find a coherent through line. Whether it's hearing Jeff Saturday talk about how this basically happened in a 12-hour swing for him, about how he said, his quote was, shocked would be an understatement. We had the conversation and it escalated quickly. He asked me and my wife. He told me he was going to meet with Chris about it, Chris Ballard, the GM. And as the day progressed, we finally came to a conclusion. It was a 12-hour whirlwind. It was a late call. Like, seeing the process and the way Jim Irsay explained, he talked about Don Shula and Tony Dungy when he talked about Jeff Saturday. He said that he was glad he didn't have NFL experience because he wouldn't have the fear that other coaches have, and then even took a dig at analytics, saying he wouldn't be relying on that because he doesn't have that fear that other coaches had. Brandon, it felt so random and chaotic in the way that it was addressed that I would be dismayed if I was someone else looking at this from the outside, because it would confirm a lot of the fears of people, which is just what you mentioned. This was someone who called up a friend and said, hey, can you do me a favor? And we know nepotism and cronyism and all those things are a part of it, but to see the process laid bare like this, I'd have to imagine would sting for a lot of people who had to watch that play out.
Yeah, but I would also, do you think I would like to think that there may be a little grain of salt in the press conference, because now they know for a fact that there isn't any real rhyme or reason behind this move, right? This seems like a lot of ego dripped into an explanation as to why the move was made, right? Like, all I hear is Jim Irsay saying that he knows what he's doing.
Yeah, no, there was a lot of that.
There's two quotes that stood out to me, and this is a friend of the podcast, Tillman Clark, my boots on the ground in Indy, sent these quotes from the press conference over because he knew they'd be great for the podcast. So this one from Jim Irsay about him winning. Look, we're the 4th winningest franchise in the league since 2000. That means in the upper quartile of winners, we're at the top quartile of that upper quartile. Mike, you know I don't do math good, and I barely do words well. I don't know what he's trying. I don't know what he's trying to say.
Yeah, well, he doesn't understand quartiles either. So the upper quartile would be the top 8 teams of 32, and the top quartile of the top quartile would then be the top 2 teams, because 1/4 of 8 is 2. And so him saying they have been the 4th most winning team would actually put them in the second quartile of the top quartile. Ooh. So
spin zone. Okay, and then this next one. This is really just like a tour in logic, the mathematical equation, logic. I don't know what goes into sausage, but I do know how to build a football team.
This felt like Jim Irsay doing his best impression of that Tommy Boy scene where he's trying to do the butcher's joke. I can get a good look at a T-bone by sticking my head up a bull's ass, but I'd rather take the butcher's word for it. He's the first scene right now where he's trying and failing to do that before lighting a car on fire in someone's office. And like, Brandon, it was like parts of that objectively funny, but it's also very sad because that's a window into a process that did not feel like there was much of a process. And I want to be abundantly clear. None of this to me is an indictment of Jeff Saturday. It really isn't. You can say I'm caping up for a person that I know and a person that I respect. But again, I put any human being in that position, and I say, a place that you care about offered you a pretty great position and an opportunity to help that you believe in your heart that you can actually help out with, that you've already in some small way been a part of, and been a part of that organization in another leadership role, in a very different leadership role for a majority of your life. I think there are very few people that would turn down that opportunity if it was something that really mattered to them. And so I really do not put this on Jeff. I'm rooting for Jeff because I think he's a good man who possesses good traits that could be helpful to any group of people. But I don't know, based on the people making the decisions at this organization, if anyone would be able to have success over the course of the back half of the season with a roster that's already struggled the way that this one has. And so I just say that to say, again, this is not to me about demeaning Jeff Saturday. This is about getting to see in that press conference a window into a process that would be an awfully big reminder of the struggles that coaches go through. And that is all coaches, but that is certainly coaches of color that are going to come into focus in this conversation.